Welcome to the Pardes channel. Today we explain Prophet Samuel 1, chapter 31 in a clear and simple way, step by step. We are literally dropping right into a high-stakes, intensely pivotal historical moment. The Israelites are in the middle of a massive, desperate military conflict, and they are getting completely overwhelmed by the advancing Philistine army. This single chapter captures the incredibly dramatic and, frankly, tragic conclusion of Israel's very first king, King Saul. We are going to look strictly at the plain meaning of the events, walking exactly through the Hebrew text, verse by verse, to really understand the who, what, where, and why of this monumental day.
So, here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at the context and the battle. Then we'll cover the death of King Saul, followed by the enemy's temporary triumph. After that, we'll dive into the rescue by Jabesh Gilead, move on to some clarifications in meaning, and finally wrap up with lessons and a final recap.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, Context and the Battle.
Our text opens in verse 1, and it firmly establishes a scene of just absolute chaos and military devastation. The Philistines have engaged Israel in battle, and the sheer force of their military machine completely overwhelms the Israelite forces. The text tells us simply but super powerfully that the men of Israel fled from before the Philistines. Now, this isn't some organized tactical retreat. It's a deadly, desperate rout. They're being driven backward and upward onto the rugged, unforgiving terrain of Mount Gilboa. You know, Mount Gilboa is a prominent, steep mountain range. And here, instead of providing a safe high ground, it actually becomes a massive trap. Exhausted and outmaneuvered, many Israelites fall slain right there on the slopes. The ground is just littered with the fallen as the defense completely collapses.
And the tragedy rapidly deepens as we move into verse 2 because the battle suddenly becomes incredibly personal and terrifyingly targeted. The Philistines realize they have the ultimate advantage, and they aren't just satisfied with winning the territorial battle, right? They are pressing hard. They're relentlessly hunting down King Saul and his royal family. The enemy forces close in, and the text specifies that they strike down exactly 3 of Saul's sons in this aggressive pursuit: Jonathan, Abinadab, and Malchishua. In one single devastating wave of violence, the immediate heirs to the throne are wiped out. The future of King Saul's royal line is completely and permanently shattered right there on the battlefield.
Which brings us to Section 2, the death of King Saul.
With his army scattered and his sons dead, verse 3 narrows our focus entirely to King Saul himself. The fighting grows fiercely intense around the isolated king. Strikingly, Saul isn't brought down in close hand-to-hand combat where, a warrior king might wield his sword and rely on his physical strength. Instead, the text points out that the archers, enemy soldiers equipped with bows and arrows, finally overtake his position. They unleash a barrage from a distance, and they hit their mark. King Saul is severely, critically wounded by these arrows. He's pinned down on the mountain, his body is failing him, the pain is agonizing, and he realizes with absolute certainty that there is no physical escape from the closing enemy forces.
Facing inevitable capture, Saul gives a desperate final order in verse 4. He turns to his armor-bearer. Now, this is the young man implicitly trusted to carry his weapons, stand by his side, and protect his life at all costs. Saul commands him, "Draw your sword and run me through, or these uncircumcised fellows will come and run me through and abuse me." Saul uses the term uncircumcised to refer to the Philistines, marking them as pagan enemies completely outside the covenant of Israel. And you can feel his fear here. It's intensely psychological. He knows the brutal reality of ancient warfare. If he's taken alive, his enemies aren't going to treat him with the dignity of a prisoner of war. Nope, they'll torture him, mock him, and turn him into a prolonged, agonizing public spectacle. So he is coldly and rationally choosing a quick, immediate death over horrific enemy abuse.
But the text tells us the armor-bearer flat out refuses the command. He is entirely paralyzed by profound terror. To strike down the anointed king of Israel is an act he simply cannot bring his hands to commit, regardless of the circumstances. So, with time running out and the enemy closing in, Saul takes his own sword, positions it, and falls heavily upon it, ending his own life to avoid that impending torture. The narrative then immediately pivots back to the armor-bearer. When this loyal servant sees that King Saul is dead, the psychological weight of the moment just completely crushes him. Out of absolute terror, a profound sense of failure, and this deep, unyielding loyalty to his fallen master, he takes his own sword too. He falls upon it, choosing to die right there alongside his king, rather than face the enemy alone or live in a world where he failed to protect his sovereign.
Verse 6 then zooms out to provide a chilling, definitive summary of this timeline, and it really underscores the incredible speed of this national catastrophe. Think about it. Within the span of a single tragic day, the vast battle on Mount Gilboa is completely lost. Saul's 3 royal sons violently fall in combat, and finally, Saul, his loyal armor-bearer, and all his immediate men die together. The sun rose that morning on a functioning monarchy with a defending army, and by sunset, it sets on the total immediate collapse of Israel's leadership and its entire inner military circle.
Moving on to Section 3, the enemy's temporary triumph.
Verse 7 shows us the massive geographic and political fallout of this defeat. Because this wasn't just a localized military loss on some distant mountain, it triggered a widespread national panic. When the Israelites living far down in the surrounding valleys, and even those across the Jordan River, saw that their military had spectacularly failed and heard that King Saul and his heirs were dead, sheer terror took over the civilian population. Realizing they were completely defenseless, they just packed whatever they could carry, abandoned their generational homes, and fled for their lives. And the devastating consequence was immediate. The advancing Philistine forces didn't even have to lay siege to these areas. They literally just walked right into the empty towns and occupied them. The enemy had fully taken the territory without firing another arrow.
The narrative timeline then shifts, in verse 8, to the very next morning. So day 1 was the absolute chaos of the battle. On day 2, the victorious Philistines return to the blood-soaked slopes of Mount Gilboa. They're there for the grim, routine aftermath of ancient combat, systematically stripping the dead soldiers of their valuables, their weapons, and their armor. And it's during this methodical looting of the battlefield that they stumble upon the ultimate, unimaginable prize. Lying there, fallen on the mountain, they find the bodies of King Saul and his 3 sons.
Verses 9 and 10 vividly describe exactly how the Philistines politically and spiritually exploit this massive discovery. First, they desecrate the king by cutting off Saul's head and stripping off his royal armor. Then they send messengers sprinting throughout the entire land of the Philistines to proclaim the joyous news. But notice, they don't just send the news to their political leaders, they specifically send it to the temples of their idols and to their people. They take Saul's armor and display it as a grand trophy in the temple of the Ashtoreths. The Ashtoreths were the pagan idols worshipped by the Philistines. By deliberately placing the defeated Israelite king's armor in that specific temple, they are making a loud, theological propaganda statement. They're publicly claiming that their false pagan gods have completely conquered and defeated the God of Israel.
The end of verse 10 reveals the absolute pinnacle of their cruelty and physical disrespect. The Philistines aren't content with just keeping the armor as a temple trophy. They take the decapitated, humiliated body of King Saul, along with the bodies of his 3 sons, and they march them to the major city of Beth-shan. There, they publicly fasten these royal bodies to the massive, imposing city wall. In the ancient world, city walls were the most visible, highly trafficked areas. Pinning the bodies there was a deliberate, gruesome public display designed to inflict maximum psychological terror and utter humiliation on any remaining Israelites. It's a loud, undeniable statement of Philistine supremacy.
Now let's look at Section 4, the rescue by Jabesh Gilead.
In verses 11 and 12, the tone of the chapter dramatically pivots from dark tragedy and humiliation to an awe-inspiring display of immense courage and loyalty. The people of Jabesh Gilead, an Israelite town with a historical debt to King Saul, hear the terrible news of what the Philistines have done to the bodies in Beth-shan, and they refuse to let this desecration stand. Every valiant, brave man in the city rises up. They embark on a grueling, incredibly dangerous march, trekking through the entire night directly into occupied enemy territory to reach the fortress of Beth-shan. Under the cover of darkness, risking total annihilation if they're discovered, they surgically execute their mission. They carefully take down the bodies of Saul and his sons from the heavily guarded enemy wall. Then, they carry them all the way back to Jabesh, where they ceremonially burn them, completely ensuring that these bodies can never, ever be abused, mocked, or strung up by an enemy again.
Verse 13 details the solemn final acts of this daring rescue. After the burning process, they respectfully gather the remaining royal bones to give them a proper burial. And they don't simply bury them in some unmarked field. They deliberately choose a specific, well-known, and permanent landmark, the tamarisk tree in Jabesh. The tamarisk is a deeply rooted, sturdy tree, and here it serves as a quiet, heavily dignified burial site for the royal family. Through this deeply respectful act, the men of Jabesh Gilead successfully restore a measure of dignity and peace to Israel's first king.
The chapter then concludes with a highly significant number. The men of Jabesh Gilead fasted for exactly 7 days. Now, fasting for a full week is an incredibly intense physical undertaking. This wasn't just a quick, secretive burial to hide their actions. No, this was a profound, physically exhausting expression of national mourning, deep grief, and unparalleled respect for their fallen leader and his sons. They truly felt the heavy loss of the monarchy in their very bones.
Let's move into Section 5, clarifications and meaning.
Having walked meticulously through the literal events, it's vital to clarify the dramatic thematic contrast that is masterfully woven into the very structure of this chapter. On one hand, the text forces us to look squarely at the absolute horror of Mount Gilboa and the Wall of Beth-shan, a humiliating military defeat, widespread civilian panic, and the deeply disturbing physical desecration of a king by his pagan enemies. It's a portrait of total darkness. But on the other hand, the chapter flatly refuses to end the narrative there. It concludes in Jabesh, showcasing an incredible burst of restorative honor, daring physical bravery, and an unwavering, unbreakable loyalty that directly counters the deep disrespect of the Philistines. The darkness is met with a quiet but powerful light.
And this leads us directly to the most crucial psychological question of the text. Why exactly did the men of Jabesh Gilead risk their own lives for a fallen, utterly defeated king? I mean, Saul was dead, his immediate heirs were dead, his army was entirely scattered, the Philistines were firmly in power, controlling the territory. There was absolutely zero political or military advantage to be gained by doing this. Yet these valiant men marched all night right into the heart of enemy territory. The text vividly demonstrates that true honor, profound gratitude, and deep loyalty don't simply evaporate just because a battle is lost or a leader has fallen. They remembered exactly who their king was, and they risked everything they had to ensure he was treated with the basic human dignity that a leader of Israel deserves.
Finally, Section 6, Lessons and Final Recap.
So, here's a clear recap of the key practical takeaways we can draw directly from the plain text of our chapter. First, actions have incredibly heavy consequences. The burden of leadership is immense. We see clearly how the fall of one central leader instantly panicked and scattered an entire nation, leaving them completely vulnerable to occupation. Second, fear can lead to highly tragic ends. We witness this in the blind panic of the Israelite civilians abandoning their homes, and in the overwhelming, paralyzing terror of the armor-bearer that ended his life. Third, we must always strive to honor the deceased. The desperate, perilous rescue of the bodies by the men of Jabesh firmly reminds us of the universal human need for respect and dignity in death, no matter the circumstances of the passing. And finally, true courage genuinely shines the brightest in the darkest of times. The valiant men of Jabesh Gilead didn't choose to act when it was safe, convenient, or politically advantageous. They chose to act in the middle of the night when the nation was shattered and all hope seemed completely lost.
So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought to deeply consider. How will you choose to show courage and loyalty when everything around you seems utterly lost? Thank you for learning with us. If this helped you understand the chapter better, like, subscribe, and join us for the next chapter.